There we go. We're live. Justin, it's so lovely to have you here. It feels like we already ran the podcast because we've been talking for the last 30 minutes. But I thought we would have such an insightful conversation with you. As I mentioned to you in these live events, I've been trying to get people that can speak about different areas of HR. And this was definitely something that I was looking forward to because coaching is something that, it's such a key part of HR, and I feel like there's nobody better than you guys to be speaking about this because you have definitely made ripples in our industry in South Africa with what you guys do. So I'd love for you to start. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did it all started for you? The Credo story. Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Amazing. First of all, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for the invite, Rose. I do appreciate it. And as you say, it does feel like we've been having a good conversation already. So hopefully we can bring some of those nuggets that we've already chatted through into this live conversation now as well. Also, so strange to be speaking to an audience, but not have an audience in front of you. But we will get through. We will get through. So yeah, I really appreciate the comments about Credo and the fact that you're hearing our name and making a few ripples in the industry. I'll give you two stories, my background and then a little bit about Credo. So I've had quite an interesting, my career has been very non-linear as far as getting into the coaching and training space. I actually have a finance background as a starting point. But when I was studying that finance degree, I realized this isn't a career path that I'm wanting to follow. It wasn't grabbing me. And I spent a lot of time or a long time very much figuring out things that I didn't want to do as much as things that I did want to do. And that was across a number of different industries, a number of different roles. And finally, I got to the stage where I was working with an amazing individual in Canada called Sean Johal, and he's a scaling up coach. And he said to me, Justin, have you ever considered getting into the coaching environment and more specifically being a strategic business coach? And up until that point, I hadn't. And I had started a few different businesses. I have always had this entrepreneurial itch to scratch. And as I say, I've worked in a lot of different industries. And the more I gave it some thought, the more I realized, geez, this is an intersection of a lot of things that I'm incredibly passionate about. It gives me the opportunity to work with totally a wide variety of people, which I love to do, understand a lot of different businesses, different industries, and really still scratch that entrepreneurial itch as well. So off the back of that conversation, I got an accreditation in the scaling up framework, which would be for any EO members listening, you'd be very familiar with that. It's a framework that's created by Vern Harnish in the US and is being used across probably 80,000 organizations to really grow their businesses. And off the back of getting into that coaching and strategic business coaching, I started doing some work with my current business partner, Helene Smuts, who's actually the founder of Credo Growth. So she and I had already known each other, and we had the opportunity now to start collaborating on a lot of projects, and we saw a real opportunity to work a lot more together. So now I'm going to jump to Credo. So Credo Growth has been around for 4 years, and as I say, was started by Helene, who has been in the space of creating high-performing teams and really taking people, as her book would say, from mediocre to high performance. And she's been doing that for about 17 years. So Credo Growth is really built on the foundation of all things people growth, culture development, high-performing teams. How do we create better leaders? Everything that takes an individual from where they are to where they can potentially be. And as I started working a lot more with Credo, we also started bringing in a strategic element to that. So we have our people growth side. We then have what we call our business growth side, or our strategy side, which is a lot of strategic workshops. So aligning around your strategic direction for your organization, and how do we take that and map it into an execution plan? Because it's one thing to have a beautiful one-pager for your strategy, but if we're not executing on it and we're not eating that elephant one bite at a time, it's really not worth anything. And then thirdly, we've got our third service pillar, which is relatively, I'm going to say it's our latest addition. We've been playing in the space since the beginning of the year, and that's sales growth, sales consulting. We actually have a third partner in the business, Richard Walton, who heads up that division for us, and that's all things sales growth. Really, so Credo Growth, we see our differentiation as if you can picture a perfect Venn diagram of people, strategy, and sales, we operate at that intersection. So we can leverage each of those in every single engagement that we have with our clients. sorry, a little bit of a long-winded story, but that has got us to where we are today.
Yes, it's lovely to hear the story. You can see how all those intersections kind of come together to build what you build. And something that I want to mention with you guys, with Credo, is that you can see there's a lot of providers out there to do, what the service is. And I feel like you can really see through the companies that take that angle of making sure the impact they're making is sustained, and that you are driven by best practices. What you're seeing, it makes sense. The fact that you now focus or add that addition of the sales, it's so speaking of that kind of path that you go into to realize, where do we make the most impact? What does a business needs, and where do we make the biggest bottom line impact? And you guys did that. So that journey that you guys have walked through and the service offering that you have added really shows you how in touch you are with what business needs, right, from a coaching and training point of view. So definitely wanted to make that remark, because it's not something that you will find in other service providers where you have your cert training courses and then you want to kind of know more and walk that journey with people and businesses. And I think you guys have got that so well. I mean, the fact that you're creating a community around sales, I mean, really, really speaks volumes to me.
I appreciate that. And I mean, it goes back, it goes to the fact that impact is actually one of our core values. Like it has to be. If we are working with a client, we absolutely want to leave an impact. So our business is really always going to be built very much on the people growth side. And having brought in the strategy side and the sales side, it's not just to have additional things to sell. As you say, it's where can we keep moving the needle in the business, for each of our clients. And very often we might have a sales conversation or we'll have a strategy conversation, but we'll end up saying, the reality is we've got to start with your people. Like if the people are not aligned and the people are not engaged, how do we then execute on a wonderful strategy, or how do we optimize a sales team? So very often it will go full circle back to the people. So yeah, I appreciate you picking up on that, because it is a big part of what we focus on.
Yes, and I relate to that, because for me, and with what I do, I had these burning questions of how do I make performance management work, and that is not something that it's just a tick box exercise. And I did not shy away from wanting to answer that question, although it took me through realizing, listen, Rose, what you learn in your university, if you apply it, it's not going to move the needle for businesses. So I think it takes a lot out of one to realize this is no, or just finding that kind of problem that you want to solve and going deep diving into how do we actually solve it. So taking that courage to say, that's where we need to go, where we see that the biggest impact will be. And I definitely see that, with you guys, that you ask the questions, you have the questions, and you go there to find the answers, you spot the right places, and you don't shy away from that conversation, to say it in a way.
Yeah, I think we try and attack the pain points that are sometimes difficult to admit that one has as a business owner. That's the reality, and there's not one size fits all. So we offer very much a bespoke service. So it can't just be like, yeah, we're going to take that off the shelf, we're going to plug it into your company, and off you go. So it is asking those tough questions, diving a little bit deeper into, like, where would you like to be, and what is holding you back from getting there? And once we understand that, we can then create, and off the back of the experience that we've got and understanding what has worked previously in a number of different organizations, really create something specifically that's going to, and I think this is a key word, that's going to resonate with that business leader as well as their team. And that resonates, I mean, the way that it's delivered resonates with the content that we share, the work that we need them to go through, but ultimately trying to get them to a better space that we've outlined together. And I think another big thing that is so important to mention, like you rightly said, there are a lot of people that play in the space. So we call ourselves a growth consultancy or a training business as well. And there are a lot of people playing in that space. And for us, it's so important. We don't like to confuse, and I think a lot of people get this wrong, confuse being professional with being boring, or being boring with being professional. And we really try to bring a huge amount of professionalism, a huge amount of expertise, but at the same time, not take ourselves too seriously, and also bring a huge amount of fun to every single engagement that we go into. And that alone makes a huge, it really does make a massive difference in just the way that we're able to connect with people that we're working with.
Yeah, that last part that you said, the fun component is so important, and something that I also had to work on, because I always link fun with, like, not necessarily unprofessional, but not the work. When you're at work, you're serious, you're getting things done, and it was through seeing the outcomes of good work being done and throwing real results that you can start having fun and enjoying what you do. So yes, fun, it's actually a really great predictor of, like, you're on the right track, you have achieved what you have achieved, and you deserve to be in that space and be happy about it. So yeah.
And also, if you think about it, and we want to speak about a little bit about engagement today, but if you think about it, if you are having fun, it means you are going to be engaged in the moment that you are in. It is impossible to be enjoying something and for your mind to be somewhere else and wishing you were somewhere else. So look, it's got to be used well and strategically. And I'll often say it's easy to design we're going to do a fun workshop together for a full day. It can't just be a fun workshop. There's still got to be proper outcomes that we get from it that are going to make an impact, see behavior change, move the needle in one's business. But it can be a secret weapon to a degree if it's used well.
Yeah, I hear you. Very interesting. I feel like in South Africa, humor, it's a big one. And something that, coming from a different industry, humor, maybe that's where I didn't have it as a factor, but it's not a thing. Like, you don't bring jokes or just kind of make a point through humor. Like, you don't do that. And it was something that I realized the impact that it can have in a very positive way in business, particularly in South Africa. So yeah, really interesting to see. And I was recently at a conference where there was someone speaking from Mexico, and then this conference with a lot of African representatives made a full kind of like acting scene, like really fun, in the stage with lights and music and speaking about HR, literally. And I could see the face of this Mexican person being like, what the heck is going on? And I think that was so, like, so representative from the culture. And I absolutely loved it.
It's an interesting one. I mean, and the use of humor it could be a completely separate conversation that we have. But I mean, there've been a lot of studies, and I don't know, I've read these things a while ago. I can't remember all the details, but a lot of studies that people who are prepared, it's almost almost a case of being quite vulnerable in front of people if you do try and tap into that humor, because it can fall flat, and a lot of people will respect that, and you kind of get a little bit more engagement, a little bit more attention from people if you have done it well. Obviously, if you have done it well is a big thing, but there's again, it's an art. There's an art to it. But it's interesting the opportunities that it opens up to connect with people, and the way that it can catch people's attention to listen to you. I often think of a good friend of mine, Richard Mulholland, and he's an incredible public speaker, and he does use, I would love to call him a motivational speaker, just in case he was listening to this, because he hates being called a motivational speaker. But he's an incredible speaker, and he's got an incredible knack for using humor really well, and very often to set up his talk, and it catches people's attention. And then they're with him for the next 45 minutes as he goes through and just drops knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb. So I've always respected that about him and the way he uses it.
Yeah, I hear you. Cool. Justin, I'd love to hear more from the Credo initiatives. So what initiatives at Credo have the most impact to engage the workforce and have them perform the best?
I suppose what we're wanting to do as a starting point is really understand what we mean by an engaged workforce, because I think it is a term that gets thrown around quite a lot. And in my own mind, if I had to just kind of bring it down to the core elements, it's a workforce that's probably, not probably, but a workforce that's motivated, a workforce that is committed. It's a workforce that really are actively involved in their roles that they're playing, and it's a workforce where you've managed to get everyone to have a sense of belonging. Those would be my really kind of 4 key elements to having a team, a workforce employees, whatever we want to call them, that we truly feel are engaged. And once we get that in place, what it means is that people are going to go above and beyond for their team, above and beyond for their manager, above and beyond for the organization. So as I said, just for me, it's quite important just to understand when we say an engaged workforce, what do we mean? It's also important to understand engagement versus unengaged versus actively disengaged, because there can be a difference. So if we get to a space where we've got our team engaged, that means that they're doing all the things that I just mentioned: motivated, committed, they're actively involved, and they feel like they belong. If we have a workforce, and the scary stats are that roughly 80% of workforce is either engaged or either unengaged or actively disengaged. And what we mean by unengaged, the best description for unengaged is, meh. They don't really care. They're neither in it. They don't really care what happens. They'll come to work. They'll do what they need to, and they'll just kind of float through. And then what you've got to be very careful of is the actively disengaged. And actively disengaged are your bad apples. So they are actively trying to create issues, and they will create issues within the organization. So obviously what we're trying to do is weed out the actively disengaged, make sure that everybody is engaged, and have very few people just floating in the middle as unengaged. Sorry, I'm giving you a long-winded answer here, but that to me is always really important to understand and work through. And for me, a lot of the ways that we really work on that, it's through. I mean, I like the fact that you also use the word interventions or engagements, but a lot of those would be culture design. So culture design engagements, and that's usually not a one-day workshop. That would be a 6 to 12-month engagement with a client. And what I like really about our culture engagements is the idea of co-creation. So the majority of organizations, whether they've done it for the right reasons or not, will have a set of core values. So they believe they've got a culture. But that doesn't mean, if you've got a set of core values that's stuck up on the wall, or even if you speak about it a lot, it doesn't mean that people are yet living that. So a culture workshop is not about just creating a set of core values. A culture workshop would be, how do we co-create the behaviors that we want to see from one another and show up for one another? And basically the best one line that I can think of here is where there's weigh in, there's buy-in. So if your team is weighing in to designing this culture together, obviously there's always going to be a huge amount of guidance from your executive team, your business owner. But if they're weighing in and really feeling part of this co-creation, it makes the buy-in and the living of those values and the behaviors and so much better. And ultimately the engagement so much better. So culture workshops, culture engagements are a big part of it. Smaller alignment workshops. So alignment purely around, what is my role? What is our role as a team? And what are we working towards as an organization? So truly understanding what you're trying to achieve, that's going to make a huge difference. So working with the teams to get them fully aligned around where they're at. We really love Patrick Lencioni, so we do a lot of 5 dysfunctions. So understanding what are these dysfunctions that really could hold a team back from becoming the high performing teams that we believe that they can be. Because you can't avoid something if you're unaware of that it actually exists. So what is tripping you up? What is tripping you up a lot of time? And once we can identify that, we can implement opportunities or ways to overcome those. And again, that's usually over a longer term process. And then, I mean, you and I were speaking about it before we started now. Leadership development, for me, leadership training is a huge part of also initiatives towards creating an engaged team. It's not always realized, but at the huge pressure that, well, let me take a step back. A lot of leaders often say to me, or often use the word incentivize. Justin, how do I incentivize my team to do this? How do I incentivize my team to be better at this? And incentivization absolutely has a part to play. So I'm not saying that for a second. But sometimes we can actually rather go the engagement route rather than incentivization. Incentivization is very often the dangling of a carrot, where engagement, if we can get engagement right, we can get a lot of the same results we would from somebody who's being incentivized with a reward at the end of the day. So what a manager needs to do is they need to create the environment. And this, for any managers listening, any leaders listening, this will actually hopefully release a bit of pressure that you may feel, because you can't force somebody to choose to be engaged. Impossible. Absolutely impossible as a leader. But what the power that you do have and the control that you need to take is to create the environment in which your team can choose to be engaged. So what does that then mean? What do you have to do as a manager or a leader to create this environment where people are choosing to be motivated, choosing to be committed, choosing to be proactive in their role and feeling like they belong? So that's a big part of the leadership training and leadership development that we do, is helping them understand how they can create that environment that their teams can really choose to be very actively engaged. It's a good monologue.
Yeah. No, it's great to hear, because you do need to consider, the full spectrum in order to do this, a good piece of work. And I love what you said, the starting point to knowing, okay, who's engaged, who's kind of, doing there what they need to do because there's a salary at the end of the month, and who's there, actually making things worse. And then to really tackle that before, any of the other work happens, because I do feel like half of the work is done by identifying the people that, okay, they're not pulling their weight. They're not, looking into a company as that kind of like long-term vision, engagement, and the loyalty and all of that needs to be there. And for us, it's also similar, where most of our interventions with clients start with the reactive interventions, where we need to follow legal proceedings because people are either misaligned or we need to terminate. And we do give them a chance to realign. And a lot of people do. Because that's the other thing to be said, when you follow process, especially the ones that are very well laid out by the SA legal framework, you have people aligning. It was just that space that was needed to things to be said and then for people to align back, which is a really rewarding piece of work. And then once that's done, then you can really start, the engagements with the people to really bring about the belonging. How does this benefit you as well as the company? And bring that sense of like, this is making sense. It makes sense for me. And, I choose to be here and things like that. And then the last thing that you said on the leadership side, I think sometimes maybe founders, CEOs, forget the fact of the impact they have on the full business. Just themselves, with a personality, with the way they come to work, sets the tone in so many levels, in so many unconscious ways, unsaid ways. And the moment they work themselves on those things, it makes a huge difference. Like literally they step into a certain level of like engagement or whatever it is that they want to put out there. And just by acting it, everybody kind of aligns with that, right? So it's
absolutely. And I think on the leadership thing, and as you say, it starts at the top. It's got to be a cascading effect. And again, for anyone listening, anyone who's in a leadership role, let's make sure people have got nuggets here, right? Let's make sure they get some good takeaways. But anybody in a leadership role, if you're thinking that your team is possible, how do I create this environment where people can choose to be engaged? For me, there's probably four immediate things that you can do. One is give some thought to, does my team or does the individual, are they able to say, I understand my role? That's the first thing. Are they able to say, I understand the impact that I have? Are they able to say that I'm leveraging my strengths? Because we all want to lean into a lot of things that we enjoy and are good at doing. So understand my role. I understand my impact. I'm leveraging my strengths. And then the fourth one would be, there's an opportunity for me to grow. And that's it. And if you can address those four things, you're already going to take a huge step forward in getting your team engaged. And just on the last one, the opportunity to grow, it doesn't always have to be, and I speak a lot about the art of followership, separate conversation possibly. But so an opportunity to grow, it doesn't always have to be a career trajectory up the corporate ladder as such. An opportunity to grow can also mean laterally, but just becoming outstanding at what it is that you do. So my skill set is currently this. I want it to be this. I want it to be this. I want it to be this. I want to be the best that I can possibly be, but I'm actually not interested in managing people. I'm happy to be where I am, but I want to be able to contribute and be outstanding at what it is that I do. That's an opportunity to grow that you need to give to people.
Yeah, 100%. And then just moving into the next question that I had for you, which I think ties very well with this, the moment that you did your interventions, you got people to align, there's that kind of buzz in there, things are happening, we're all kind of, how do you keep that going forward? What's kind of that sustainable approach to make sure that, cool, we reach that level, but it's something that we have to continuously work on, right?
Yeah.
So I know you have plans for periods, but I'd love to hear how that part of the engagement looks like.
Yeah. So we take it seriously enough that we generally try not to have one-off engagements with clients. And one-off engagements, I just mean like a single day workshop. We take it so seriously that we built it into our brand promise that we offer to clients, that even if we do have a once-off workshop with you, we promise that you are going to be hearing from us for the next 3 months, because we're wanting to see a change, and we're wanting to make an impact. But generally what we'll try and do is we'll try to build in 3 to 6 month engagements or interventions with our clients. That's really important to us. A lot of time that will be teed up by a 1 or 2 day full day workshop, and then off the back of that, smaller sessions. So that's, as I say, that's the starting point for us. So usually a full day workshop. Off the back of that, we would go into either half day workshops every month, or 2-hour sessions every month over a 3 to 6 month period, to reinforce those learnings. So there'll be commitments in the session up front. What is it that you need to go and do off the back of that? What behaviors do you need to change? What do you need to start implementing in your standard day to day? And then holding them accountable to that in those sessions that we're doing, and bringing in a different layer, or a slightly different lens at which to look at things that they have learned. So that would usually be us doing a lot of the hand holding at that stage. What we also really like to do with teams, and there's a lot of power in this, is get them to get into their own accountability groups. So we would usually do our intervention, our engagement, and either during that or towards the end of it, we would put them into accountability groups, which can be 3 or 4 people, and we'll coach them through the process of how do you moderate those yourself. So we'll moderate 1, 2 of those sessions with them, and accountability groups can be anything from 30 minutes to 60 minutes long, but getting them to have the structure, the confidence, the understanding to have those sessions themselves, hold each other accountable to what it is that they're wanting to implement in the business. It's the classic thing of teach a man to fish. That's what we're wanting to do. So we're wanting to empower people to be able to do it themselves. And then with that, we will also continue with certain select individuals. It can't always be with everyone. We would love it to be with everyone, but one-on-one coaching. So whether that's your leadership team that undergoes some executive coaching, or one-on-one coaching, management coaching, whatever it may be, to get them to really embrace what it is their role is in this intervention, and the impact that they can have on the development of the team. That's another big part that we play. And then lastly, we have a centralized, we call it a living document, where everything that we go through with our client lives in this one central area, which everybody has access to. So any content that we've been through, any videos that we've been through, we'll often do recap videos that we'll post into this document. So there's a repository of information that people are always able to refer back to, just to continually make sure that they are revisiting the ideas, understanding what it is that they need to improve on, understanding where they can possibly be tripped up. So all in all, we kind of bring that together in this nice, clean process that we like to implement with our clients. Does that answer the question, Rose?
Yeah, very much. And when you were saying about this, sustained approach that you have, where you have, meetings in a timeline, right, to make sure the concepts are coming through, and I think that's such a key part of the process, because the way I understand knowledge is that you impart knowledge, or you have a session where people brainstorm, and that meets a person in a time of their lives, in a circumstance of their lives, with whatever knowledge they had from before. They're making those connections then. And then the moment you leave them with time for them to kind of churn or think about the content, how they apply whatever homework, or whatever you kind of engage them to do, then after, it's almost like a spiral where they will look at that concept that they worked on, and there's already so much digested and new that can be said. And that's really how you kind of like evolve in that kind of upskilling and learning things from a different perspective. So I take that it's probably very insightful and rewarding for you every time that you do a new session and you see how people are kind of, like progressing and, guiding them in that journey, right?
Yeah, it's obviously massively rewarding, and what makes me realize how important it is how often we'll have those follow-up sessions. So the typical thing is people walk out of a workshop and they're like, that was amazing, we love that, I feel so energized, I learned all these things. You go back to your desk, it's business as usual, you got 300 emails in your inbox, and everything that you've just learned, because all the stress comes washing back in, everything that you learned kind of gets parked. So very often in those follow-up sessions, things that we hear are, I love this, I hadn't even thought about it since the last session. So it's so important. And if we think about drip feeding knowledge is what we're wanting to do with people. So it's not a case of repeating things. Yes, we do want to repeat it because that's how you're going to learn, but just to make sure that it's not forgotten immediately. It's the reason why apps like Readwise, I don't know if you use Readwise. So if you're a Kindle user, if you connect your Kindle to Readwise, everything that you highlight gets synced to Readwise, and then they send you a daily email with your highlights from your top books. And that's amazing. And when I go into my Readwise account in the morning, I look at all these things and I'm like, geez, I remember highlighting this. I haven't thought about it since I highlighted it, but man, I love that. That's so great to have been able to read it again. So that's kind of the same feeling and effect that we want to give to people every time we touching base with them as such.
Yeah, and I also love the fact that you are building a kind of resource knowledge base, because I think what that does is that you walk a journey with companies, with staff, and they can refer back to how things started and how things are going now, always being able to tap back onto resources that you gave. And I think that walking that journey is so powerful, because people then know that you are there for them, that it wasn't just a once-off. And I think there's people like speakers that have that type of presence where once-off can make a massive impact in people's lives. But I feel like the sustained approach, to me, it's a much more, walk the journey with people. You are talking to people that are disclosing about their lives. You need to remember what's going on with them and come back to them and how, be there for them. So maybe that's more in the South African context, where they used to operate as a community, companies. It's not just work, right? It's we all come here, we all suffer for each other, we're all happy for each other, and we walk a journey together. So it's kind of following that approach.
Agreed. I mean, I heard this from Mike Scott a few years ago, and he speaks about business is just people doing stuff with other people. And that we need to keep in mind when you're selling to other businesses. So instead of almost thinking B2B, it's P2P, it's person to person. But also managing our team and managing our own organizations, that is just people doing stuff with other people. And we can't lose sight of that. I mean, that is so unbelievably important. And it's why we go on about needing to create connection with one another, understand one another a lot better. It's why we big into personality profiling as well. It's to better understand how you communicate, how you can show up, why somebody else is showing up the way that they do. We all just people doing stuff with other people. That's really important. And then just on your point of the motivation, I 100% agree. There are some incredible speakers that can come in, but it's kind of like a sugar high. It can be a bit of a sugar rush, where motivation can generally be quite short-lived. And what we're wanting to do is create the discipline in order to create the behavior change. And Jocko Willink speaks about, he's the author of Extreme Ownership and a number of different books. And he speaks about the fact that discipline will trump motivation any day of the week. You won't wake up every single day feeling like going for a run, or feeling like going to the gym, or feeling like managing your team well, or whatever it is. But if you have the discipline to do it, it will eventually just become who you are. So it's not even a question of it's actually surpasses a habit. So discipline will become a habit, and then it just becomes who you are. This is what I do. And that's kind of where we ultimately, I would love us to get there with the way that we make these changes within the teams.
Yeah, I hear you. On that point of like the one session impact, I feel like that's a very, to say it in a way, 90s style, like old style, that if you're in tune and keeping engaged with the way we should go about life and work in our context, it is all about walking the journey together, and that kind of thing, like like having an idol or just having like, that's what you aspire for. I'm sorry, that's not doing it for me. You need to learn so much about that person, the context, and yes, it can be inspiring. I'm not saying I also listen to talks of influential people and stuff like that, but to me it's like, I want to walk journeys with people. I want to make sure that that's where the way you kind of help change or people grow. Now, linked to this, do you have hard metrics that you measure to kind of see the impact of what you guys do, the interventions that you do?
So generally on the metric side, where things that we'll start off measuring are usually doing something along the lines of a 360-degree survey. So that is how a lot of the time, how does the team see the organization? How does the team see certain leaders or certain managers in the business? How do the team see one another? 5 dysfunction surveys, and so the 360 gives us really concrete feedback to work through. We also use the 5 dysfunction survey a lot, and even if we aren't necessarily just going through the 5 dysfunctions framework, the 5 dysfunctions survey gives you a great idea of where an organization, and this gives you hard metrics, it gives you ratings of where an organization is across those various areas of the model. And off the back of that, we can always, at the end of an engagement, track and see, okay, well, where have we got to now? So that's very much on the people side. On the strategy and the sales side, a lot of that just is your hard financial metrics. On the sales side, have we moved the needle, and have you seen an increase, or have your conversion rates improved, and have you seen more revenue? Like, that's ultimately where we're wanting to get to. Strategy can be a little bit of a longer burn, like people can, when it comes to revenue. But ultimately on the strategy side as well, we wanting to have clear strategy that people are aligned around, translate that into an execution plan that people can work through on a 90-day basis. They know what they need to execute on. And then ultimately where we're wanting to get to, and this can take 12 to 18 months, is absolutely, again, increased profitability in your business, better margins. So on that side, which usually we'll go to the financial metrics. On the people side, as I say, it's surveys up front. What are we trying to improve? It's understanding that from the client. What do we want? Where do we want to see the needle move? Make sure we've measured that up front, and then measure that again at the end of the engagement. This is your space, though. So what would you say? What would you say is important to measure?
Yeah, 100%. The business metrics need to be tracked, and see how your interventions, how just chunking it into like, okay, we ran this cycle, how has the business performed? And it is one of the most rewarding pieces of work when you see, yes, everybody's aligned. That's what we identify. Whoever wasn't aligned is not part of the business. The business has done this well, and always have that business talk. All employees enjoy the business talk, and I feel like it's something companies should do more and more of. Obviously, there's some sort of transparency levels that need to be set. You don't need to disclose your revenue, whatever. Use percentages, or try as with what you feel comfortable. Bring as much business understanding, because what that does 2 things. One is makes people feel like, cool, thank you for disclosing all of this. I'm with you. Like, I want the same vision, and I'm with you.
Yeah.
And then also they see themselves in that, like, how do I kind of align to that, right? And in that kind of mindset of what we are achieving. So the business metrics are so important. And I think people like learning about them. Not all of us studied, finances. So it's great to explain these things to people. It brings a lot of like same language that we speak, because that is the language of the founder, right? So
share it as a story. Share it as a story. I think that's the key when it comes to that, so everybody can understand.
Yes. Then another thing that I recently done, and this was also a very rewarding metric to follow, is that we have a proactive product to get feedback and see how people are doing, and make sure that managers are giving feedback on the performance and things like that. And I ran a user case of a client where the first 6 months of the year, they didn't have this product. And then the next 6 months of the year, they did have the product. In the first 6 months of the year, we activated 10 reactive products. So that would be your counseling, your hearings, your inquiries, retrenchments, those type of products. In the next 6 months, only 2, because we had that proactive feedback loop taking place. I mean, how amazing is to look at that and see exactly the moment you have a proactive communication loop, it decreases the reactive interventions. So yeah, that was a cool metric because HR really needs to focus on metrics, because we're not a money-making department. Usually CEOs will be like, how are you making a difference? Well, yes, that's how you're making a difference.
Do you think HR departments put too much emphasis on retention?
Yeah, that came through a conversation as well. And there's something really valid to say about that retention, it's probably not a hard metric to follow, because you don't want to kind of like, I want to retain. It's actually, I want to create a really cool work environment. Whoever is in for the ride and it makes sense for your life, come along. And if you go, it was time to go.
Yeah.
So I have done that change in myself, where my narrative has changed from talent retention to employee engagement, employee experience, because it's really like, I don't want to retain you if you don't want to be here. You go on and do your thing.
Exactly. I think if you segment, well, I've got to be careful what I say. If you segment your team, though, to understand who are your A players, who are your B players, who are your C players, if you kept retention metrics across those, you absolutely want to retain your A players. Let's not beat around the bush. And even your B players, you're going to be actively trying to work them towards becoming A players. But C players or anything less, if there's turnover there, maybe that's okay, as long as you're replacing them with a B and an A, because you don't want just to go through the cycle. But I saw a really interesting stat recently, and it was something like 63.3% of organizations feel it's more difficult to retain employees currently than it is to go out and hire new employees, which I thought was really interesting comment to see.
Yeah, it is. And that's another metric that we bring to the table. How many internal promotions, or promotions are internal in nature, are we able to do in a company in the year? We usually do this metric.
I like that.
That is a massive, for us, kind of, we feel very successful in our interventions when we can show you how many people we promoted. And of course, through, not because we the sake of giving you titles, and no, like you had this responsibility, you took on more responsibility, your CTC changed, and the whole full-on promotion procedure. But that tells us that if you have a good working culture where you can look inside to fill in the gaps that you have in the business, your people are going to stay with you, because the moment you go out to recruit for seniority management levels, people are going to be like, I'm sorry, I'm not staying here. You're not giving me the chance. Where's my career growth? So that's another measure of success that we push our companies a lot to do. Let's recruit internally first. And the last thing which you touched base, which I thought was really interesting, is that I'm currently finished a cycle of performance for a client, because it's the end of the year. But I'm still having these conversations with each employee. And I always like to bring the business conversation, how the business is doing, what the business is striving for. How do we align with that? And because they haven't given me yet the 2024 vision, I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't have this conversation. There's nothing I can ground myself onto speaking to the employee. What am I going to say? Great, tell me about yourself, where you are, let's reflect. But I can't tell them, let's plan the future, because I still don't know what the company is headed towards. And how key.
It's so important, and the best way to describe it is there's a big difference between moving forward and moving toward. So if you haven't got alignment and an understanding of where we're going to, you can't move toward anything. So you're just moving forward. And if you think about starting from, and it's the same as an airplane or a ship leaving from a port, if they are 1 degree off for every, whatever it is, I never know what the metric is, but for every 600 miles that they travel or whatever it is, they miss their target by like 10 miles or something ridiculous. And it's the same. We may feel like we're moving forward, but if we 1 degree off, we are going to miss where we meant to be by absolute miles. So we have to be aligned, so that cascading down again from the top all the way to the bottom of your organization, that we are moving actively towards something as a single unit. So it's so important. And I think a lot of people overlook how important it is. And going back to being engaged, you also want to understand, what is my role that I'm playing in moving towards this particular thing, the strategic destination that our CEO has put the flag in the ground saying that's where we want to be. What am I doing to contribute to that? It's that classic story of the janitor at NASA, when JFK, I think it was, that asked the janitor, what do you do? What is your role? And he said, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. Like, that was it. He understood that if he didn't do his role, he or she didn't do their role properly, that the engineers and the scientists and wouldn't be able to do what they needed to do in order to get this person on the moon. Yeah. So make sure, does your team know that they are playing an active role in getting a man on the moon?
I love that. And there's something around the simplicity with which that mission is being explained, of what we're trying to achieve, which I think is really important, so that it gets, it doesn't get, it gets understood the way the CEO, the founder, meant it to be. So there's no possibility of like different perceptions of things. It's very simple what we're trying to achieve. And then what I love doing in my sessions is that I ask people, do you agree with this? Do you think this is where the company needs to go? Because if we give a little bit of room for digest it, let's say people don't agree, but we're not hearing about this. So they're not aligned because, they don't think. Yeah. So having that buy-in and allowing, again, that business conversation to all levels in the organization, it's such a powerful exercise, because obviously you get data, you can feedback, and you can, talk again and make sure those messages are coming across, so everybody is aligned. Now, Justin, I think we need to wrap up because we could continue going, I can see, for a very long time. But I'd love to hear, in terms of Credo, there has been something new being birthed recently, which is Thriving, a community which is quite specific for sales, people in sales and business development, and founders that want to grow their businesses. Tell us a little bit about that initiative. What are you trying to achieve with this? How it links to Credo? How it all started?
Absolutely. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about it briefly. But so Helene and Richard, my business partners, and myself, we've all been pretty actively involved in either EOA in some way, or Entrepreneurs Organization Accelerator, or Entrepreneurs Organization, and have absolutely loved the impact that has had on ourselves, and the impact that we've seen it's had on the community that are parts of these communities. And obviously, our service offering, we've got our people growth, we've got our strategy side, and then we've got our sales side. And we really saw a need and an opportunity for sales leaders to have a similar peer-to-peer network, a similar community where they have the opportunity to kind of connect with like-minded people, but to learn from one another, because that's what these communities are really all about. So that birthed the idea of Thriving, Sales Leaders Network, Thriving Community. And it really is a network for community for sales leaders. And by sales leaders, like you said, it's sales managers and BDMs, or business development managers, to learn from one another, to join the network in order to learn from the workshops that we host, the learning days that we host, the guest speakers that we have coming to speak specifically to the community. And ultimately, they also get put into small forum groups. So you build a really close connection with a group of roughly 5 other sales leaders. And we'll put people in non-compete industries, but you'll be able to develop a really close relationship and share challenges in your forum sessions, understand what is working for other businesses, what can you implement in yours, be held accountable, which is a great word, be held accountable to goals that you're setting for yourselves, but importantly, have quite a safe space that you might not always feel like you have at your workplace to share some of those challenges that you're having. So all in all, we have sales coaches who moderate those forum groups on a monthly basis. And then in between that, as I say, there are really deep dive learning days, workshops, and guest speakers who come and speak on all manners of sales topics that sales managers really need to know. How do you maintain the energy levels of your sales team? How do you build world-class A players in your sales team? How do I optimize my CRM? How do I optimize our sales process? Whatever it is, we deep dive in those sessions, and then you rehash that in your forum groups and you implement as you go. So very excited about it. We launched it about 4 months, just over 3 months ago. We actually hosting a live event next week here in Cape Town for it, and we're really excited to see where it goes, and we think that sales managers are going to love the support that the community is going to give them.
Yeah, we're gonna post the information on here in this event, so people want to see more about it. I think what I really like about the space that you're creating is that, as a business developer, sales manager, as a founder, you focus on your organization, right? But the moment you realize that you're part of an ecosystem and you're actually, make things work as an ecosystem, see what's out there, gain knowledge, bounce ideas, but also strive for something. Like I recently was part of an HR conference that it's part of a global conference. So you get to hear what HR is doing globally. So if you hear, and again, the business metrics, what is South Africa trying to achieve? What's our GDP? Where are we going? What industries? And if we can bring that into our conversation, it automatically elevates your function because you're part of a greater, something. So I think that's such an incredible space.
It's unbelievable. Just the understanding that you're not alone in some of the challenges that you face is massive for people. Like a huge takeaway in so many of our group sessions is, geez, it's actually just great to hear that I'm not the only one that has this challenge. I didn't realize other people are facing this as well. And it's like a huge weight that gets just lifted off people's shoulders that they've been carrying. Think, is it me? Am I the only one that's struggling with this? Is there something wrong in my business? No, you suddenly realize, okay, we're all dealing with this. And then it's a wonderful opportunity to understand how each of the other people have got over that particular road bump or speed bump.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing that comes out, and we see it so often.
Yeah, I can imagine because if you are, concerned, let's say you're not getting it right, but you're guarded, you're not sharing, then it's all on you and your back to make this work. The moment you can kind of decompress and be like, guys, this is just not working for me. How are you? There's so much kind of openness, vulnerability, and let's sort this out together, right? So there's so
it's empowering. It's actually massively empowering, and that can sometimes be the strange thing about it. Opening up and admitting is empowering. All of a sudden, you've freed space to find solution rather than just to carry challenge.
I love that. Cool. I'm really excited about that, and hopefully we'll be part of check out the space. I'm keen to walk that journey.
Amazing.
Great. Thank you so much for the conversation, Justin. I think we really kind of got to understand a bit more of how Credo works, what type of interventions that you do, what you keep in mind when you use interventions, and any company will benefit from an offering like this. It's a no-brainer, really. If you want to elevate your people game and really create a culture where people can thrive, it is really the space to tap onto. So thanks for sharing your nuggets.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and facilitating the conversation. It's been a lot of fun. So hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yes. Cool, Justin. Hope you have a lovely day. We're going to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Rose. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I'm ending the stream.